Hi, thanks for tuning in. So I'm going to be reviewing the discussion between Alex O'Connor and Justin Brierley. Went out a couple of days ago on Alex O'Connor's channel. Is New Atheism Dead? Justin Brierley on the surprising rebirth of belief in God. So I've seen Justin Brierley a few times. Can't remember the name of his channel, but he's a Christian, of course, and he would typically host either another Christian or maybe an atheist, have a discussion. I'm not a great fan of his. Some of the arguments that he's used, well, let's not go to that. Let's go to the actual discussion. So, the claim, the surprising rebirth of belief in God. This is not really something that the statistics, at least in the Western world, really supports. And to be fair, Justin Brierley does concede that. He does concede that there's a net, well, I say he concedes that in the Western nations, Britain, Scandinavia, the EU, America, Canada, in the, shall we say, advanced world, that there is a fall in belief in God, a fall in the number of people or the percentage of people who claim to be religiously affiliated. However, there is a rise in Christian belief and theism in other parts of the world. He mentions China, India, Africa, and, well, yeah, I agree with him. According to the figures, that is the case. So in the developing world, religion seems to be making inroads, or it seems to be expanding its base of believers. But in the advanced world, I suppose, where, let's face it, conditions are better for people economically and standards of education are generally higher, there is a decline. Society is becoming increasingly more secular. So this surprising rebirth of belief in God, I wonder what he's referring to. Well, somewhere around about halfway through the video, he uses the phrase, God is now back on the table. And he's thinking of, I don't know, going back to when Dawkins released The God Delusion, and there was a lot about new atheism, about how it's a lot more militant and aggressive and anti-theistic, but that there have been certain developments in the last, say, 5 years that are turning things around. And one of these developments he cites is the move towards, should we say, I don't know, woke or cancel culture, whatever you want to call it. And the backlash against that, particularly among certain groups of atheists who are starting to supposedly see that maybe Christianity in particular has its uses, as the phrase that Justin himself uses, or Alex, I'm not too sure. Maybe it's better the devil you know, that with this pushback against theism, this attempt to marginalize theism as a way of justifying, shall we say, morality, that there have been consequences for that, and we've seen certain trends towards more tolerance for example, homosexuality, LGBTQ, etc., and that even Dawkins himself is starting to say, well, you know, maybe Christianity has been useful in maintaining certain values and certain status quo values in society. Yeah, this utility argument that Christianity somehow is of some use, and we've seen this from Jordan Peterson, who it seems does not believe in a real God, but insists that we should believe in a metaphorical God because there's no other proper grounding for morality. I've got some notes here. Let me just have a look. Yeah, so just coming back to what Justin was saying. He said he's noticed that there's been a mellowing of the former shrill tone of new atheism. Yeah, and he mentions Dawkins, and he cites one or two others, and as some kind of evidence that there's a switch, there's a move back towards theism. He mentions Douglas Murray, who I had to look up because I wasn't aware of who Douglas Murray is. He's a British, I think, political commentator. He's very anti-Islam, and he's also very anti-woke. He has stated that men can't become women. He apparently is gay himself, but he's made a statement to the effect that homosexuality can't be a kind of reasonable, I don't know, it can't provide any proper basis for being an individual in society. I hope I'm not misquoting that, but he seems to have a lot about him which is very anti-woke. He rubs shoulders with Joe Rogan. Now, I suppose I'm poisoning the well here, but I'm just trying to give you some background on him, some sort of context for why maybe Justin is quoting him and citing him. So it seems that he also went to Oxford, as of course Alex did. I'm not sure if Justin did, but maybe he did. And Douglas Murray, while Hitchens was still alive, had numerous, came under his influence apparently. And from what Justin said, Hitchens was instrumental in turning Douglas Murray from theism to atheism. And Douglas Murray apparently has said recently that he's given credit to Christianity for providing a moral base for society, and he's now, according to Justin, describing himself as a Christian atheist. He doesn't believe in a real God, but he lives his life, it seems, to all intents and purposes, if you exclude the prayer bit and going to church and the Eucharist and everything, lives his life as if he is a Christian in terms of his moral outlook. And he has made the statement to Justin that many of his intellectual friends are turning to theism. Now, we've got no, I mean, obviously this is just hearsay. This is something that Justin has said. It sounds to me a little bit like Christian propaganda, that the idea that intellectual peers of Douglas Murray are switching to theism and Christianity in particular sounds a bit to me like Christian propaganda. And to be honest with you, listening to this podcast sounded a lot of the time like pure Christian propaganda, because Alex did, as per normal, I've noticed in the last few that he's done when he's been speaking to theists, hasn't really done a lot to counter the claims. So obviously there are some issues that have come from what he said. The idea that, for example, Peterson keeps coming back to, that we've got to give Christianity its due because it's the grounding, it's the basis of morality, and it needs to be given some kind of respect or some kind of belief, at least in a metaphorical sense. And this seems to be what Justin is saying, that we need to give Christianity this respect. And we also need to acknowledge that, for example, Christopher Hitchens was able to write a subversive book like God is Great, because of Christianity, that Christianity, by its very nature, resulted in a society which embraces free speech, a pluralistic society, this melting pot of views. And I wonder about that claim, because, okay, that's how it ended up, but for the bulk of the Dark Ages, it wasn't like that. We know it wasn't like that, and even in Britain, it's only in the last 20 years that the blasphemy laws were finally abolished. I know the blasphemy laws were not really used in the last 200 years much, I think only once or twice. But nevertheless, for centuries and centuries, it was illegal to speak your mind if you did not toe the line of Christianity. And there are countless examples, of course, of people who've been put to death for stating their beliefs, stating their non-belief. So I don't know how fair it is to say that Christianity, by its very nature and its theology, has resulted in the kind of society where somebody like Christopher Hitchens could write God is Great, and that Richard Dawkins is standing on the shoulders of Christian thinkers and Christian influencers over the ages. I think that's debatable. I think there were secular pressures, the age of the Enlightenment, when philosophers were starting to question whether there really is a God, and that it's more been that secular thinking has been responsible for where we are today in terms of freedom of speech and everything. So I would take issue with him there in terms of what he says. I would not give Christianity that credit. It held back progress, it held back freedom of speech for at least 1,000 years. In fact, I saw a graph, I'm going to post it as a theme, I forgot to do it, but there's a really good graph which shows, classical civilization, knowledge increasing, and then from like 33 CE or whenever it was, suddenly it falls off a cliff, and then it like flatlines until relatively recently, the last few hundred years. There's virtually nothing happening in science until the 17th century. So I don't really agree with him that Dawkins is standing on the shoulders of Christian thinkers and Christianity, and I don't agree that the morality that we've got today, we can credit Christianity with it. It's one factor, of course it is, but because we can cite so many examples of how Christian morality was actually applied and how disastrous that was, unless you can't cherry pick. You've got to look at the whole picture. So Alex, of course, did not really challenge him on that claim. Let's just see what else I've written down here. Yeah, so this thing about this rebirth of belief in God, he's talking about religious faith. That it's like the tide goes out, the tide can come back in, and he's claiming the tide is coming back in. I mean, in my life, outside of online, the people that I know, I don't get the sense that the tide is coming back in. I don't get the sense that people are coming back into the churches, and I don't get the sense that religion is coming back in. I see more and more secularism all the time and less religion. But I suppose that Justin mixes in different circles compared with the ones that I mix in. He does talk about C.S. Lewis, of course, who was a great hero, and I learned a bit more about C.S. Lewis, that he was an atheist, and that he was walking in the grounds of Magdalen College in Oxford with Tolkien, apparently, and he suddenly realized that Christianity is true and that it hit him. It wasn't an intellectual realization. One can kind of imagine walking around, if you've walked in Oxford and all the beautiful colleges, the Gothic architecture and everything, and I can imagine that somebody with a silver spoon in his mouth like C.S. Lewis suddenly felt this, oh, I'm so fortunate, I'm in this amazing environment. Maybe there is a God after all. But yeah, so moving on back to Jordan Peterson, again, coming back to this rebirth, the belief in God, coming back to what they were saying about Jordan Peterson. I know this video I'm doing a bit of a hodgepodge, but that's just the nature of it. So things are reoccurring to me. Yeah, so Jordan Peterson, so Justin acknowledges that he's not actually a theist. He doesn't believe in a real God. He acknowledges that it's more a utility thing and more a metaphor thing, but that Jordan Peterson's wife and I think his daughter are both fully fledged Christians, that they looked at the overall picture and something about Christianity made sense to them, and they embraced it. They go to church, pray, etc. And he did say that with Christianity, or I think it might have been Alex who said that when we see people converting from atheism to Christianity, the final step is not an intellectual one, it's more coming from emotion. as it did with C.S. Lewis, that something suddenly hit him. And then Justin said, well, that's true to an extent, because, there comes a moment when you've got to suddenly surrender. But then he was proposing that it was a combination of intellect and sort of intuition, that your intellect, you can build a case for the existence of God intellectually, but that at some point you have to say that you've got enough, you've got the bar, you've got over the bar, and then you can make the leap and you can surrender. So that apparently is the process that he's witnessed, and maybe that he experienced himself. What else have I got here? Just a moment, please. Excuse me a moment. Oh yeah, well, just one other thing. Alex mentioned the book by Douglas Wilson? The Atheist Delusion. Yeah, there were some books that played on Dawkins' title, some sort of satires and sort of mocking that position. And there was one called the Atheist Delusion. I got Douglas Wilson confused with Douglas Murray just because they came very close in the conversation. Alex was talking about Douglas Wilson's book, and then Justin suddenly mentioned Douglas Murray. That's when I had to go and look them up. And yeah, Douglas Wilson's book, The Atheist Delusion, on Amazon. I went to have a quick look. It's got 9 reviews. I mean, not that this matters. The Atheist Delusion's got about 12,500 reviews. So, I mean, I'm not arguing for popularity or anything, but it looks to me like The Atheist Delusion or books of that type have not really been great sellers, which doesn't say anything to the truth of them, but I just found it interesting. Yeah, so that's about it, really. Just to sort of finish off, because at the end of the conversation, Justin was saying that, yeah, so he was saying that he wouldn't be surprised if we see some big name conversions within the next, I think he said 5 years. He's expecting, because of this so-called surprising rebirth of belief in God, that we will see some big name conversions in the next sort of 5 years. And he was kind of looking at Alex meaningfully when he said that. Maybe, I know a lot of Christians and people are expecting Alex to reconvert, but he keeps reaffirming his disbelief. He says, he's still an atheist, not a hard atheist. He lacks belief in God. He's open. He's not resistant. He is open, but yes, he is still an atheist. And Justin said, it would be wonderful, Alex, to have you as a Christian. I can imagine that millions could be potentially donated to charity if it was possible that Alex could, if by some mechanism Christians could donate money and have Alex convert to Christianity, it could potentially generate millions and millions for charity. For example, if all the online Christians out there, if they were told that they could pay, shall we say, $10 to make Alex somehow wake up and become a Christian, I'm sure that they would do that. Personally, I wouldn't pay a penny for anybody to go either one way or the other, but I can imagine that Christians would do that to see. And I would find it very amusing if Alex turned to Christianity. I would find it hilarious. And of course, I would want to know why. I wouldn't be disappointed. And obviously, we've seen Alex go from one position to another, as we did with veganism. And had I been a vegan at that time, and Alex, I'm not a vegan, but had I been a vegan at that time when, Alex was being used as a poster boy for veganism by a lot of vegans, and when he announced that he was no longer a vegan, had I been a vegan at that time, it wouldn't have made any difference to me. I would have been interested in why, and it would be the same case if Alex turns to Christianity. I would want to know why, what convinced you. And if he's going to tell me that he just suddenly had a feeling, or no, I would want to know the intellectual reasons. I wouldn't want to know the emotional appeal of it. And I wouldn't want to know the utility appeal of it. And I wouldn't want to know anything about intuition. I would want to know something that I could test myself, some evidence that I can personally examine. So, yeah, so it did sound that there was a lot of Christian propaganda there coming from Justin. And I think that he's giving more. I think he's overemphasizing, he's exaggerating this so-called rebirth of belief in God. And it seems to me that his evidence is this Douglas Murray character said to him. This is the one piece of evidence that he really cited. Said that many of his peers were, intellectual peers, were converting or reconverting back to Christianity. Well, I haven't seen any evidence of that personally, and we've only got his word for it. He knows that Justin is a Christian, and he may have just been saying that. Just maybe he knows somebody, maybe he exaggerated it a bit. I don't know, but even if it's true, it doesn't make any difference to me. And even if everybody in the world converts tomorrow, and I'm the sole atheist in the world, I will still want to see what the evidence is. So, well, I don't want to turn this into an atheist propaganda show. But yeah, well, that's about it. I would really like to know what. I probably missed something out. It was a 1 hour, 15-minute conversation. If you've got any thoughts on it, or indeed my take on the whole thing. Did it sound to you like a lot of Christian propaganda? Is Alex letting his guest get away with too much? He certainly seems to be going that way. Not because I think he's coming any closer to theism, but I don't know. Maybe it's an economic decision, because obviously we've all got bills to pay. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks a lot for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. Bye for now.